Welcome back to another Caring Support podcast. This week, we have a lovely person named Kim Valentine. And Kim's got quite a great story for us to share with our audience, but I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'm going to ask her to do that, obviously. So it's really great to have you here, Kim. We appreciate you making the time. I know you're very, very busy. So maybe you could do a quick little introduction of yourself, please.
Okay, thanks, James. Yeah, thanks for inviting me here today. That's great. I love seeing what Caring Support is doing. Just a little bit about myself. I graduated from nursing back in the 80s, and at that time I worked primarily in critical care. I transitioned out of ICU and ended up going to home care. I was a visiting nurse for a number of years, worked as a nurse educator. In that time, I did go back to school and got my degree because back in the 80s, most nurses graduated with their diploma. So then I went back and got my BSN. So that was a journey too. And then I sort of gravitated at that time to, more geriatrics. I kind of, even though I'd worked ICU as a generalist ICU, it was ICU, CCU, there were a lot of geriatric, older adult patients. So I ended up having special interest in that when I did go back to school and specialized in caring for dementia, people with dementia. Worked as a geriatric nurse in primary care for a few years. Worked in geriatric outreach, doing clinics and cognitive testing, and working with geriatricians and geriatric psychiatrists. So, yeah, I've with nursing, I've been able to go down several different avenues, and that's been the great part of the career for sure.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Obviously, you've been pretty busy. So,
It's been years.
yeah, absolutely. No, she did that in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, but so here's the thing, a quick question, and thank you for that. I really appreciate it because I think it gives our audience the opportunity to realize that you really know, nursing. You understand, so much about it and have put so much of your life into it. And it's wonderful to see that what you've done. So next question is basically that next transition that happened about the writing. What made you decide to become a writer, and what would you say is the best part of your journey?
Well, it's funny because I've always enjoyed writing. But I never sort of put writing and nursing in the same pot. I ran across some writing by a nurse named Elizabeth Haynes, and she has a program called RN to Writer, and it's basically learning how to do freelance health writing. So I read her book, took the course, and it's been amazing, the
Hmm.
transition, because as I tell people, it's given me a voice. So, a lot of that health teaching I've, done with patients in the past, where you do that one-on-one health teaching. Now you can write an article on, Alzheimer's, and you can reach more people with that one article than you can if you were just doing teaching with family one-on-one. So that
Right.
that's been great. Like I say, it's given me a voice, and I also use part of my background in nurse education too, and I've written some nurse education articles as well. So it's been a really fun journey. Sure.
That's good. That's awesome. I love it. So, but in these articles, you talk about things like cognition, dementia, health and aging, and of course, other related, topics. So, what do you think? Why do you think you developed an interest in these topics in particular?
Um, more out of my, certainly my experience of working in geriatrics, older adult care, working in the clinics. Definitely we have a population of people reaching an age that there's going to be more prevalence of cognitive deficits, and the earlier someone has a diagnosis of a dementia, the sooner that they can get some kind of treatment, be it to slow down the progression of the illness. And sometimes people might not notice there is a decline with someone. So I just really feel it's important that people are educated for their loved ones, so that they can recognize any changes, make, future planning, that kind of thing.
No, that's amazing. And we are in a, you know, um, thankfully immigration is helping with this, but we're in an aging population that we have, or a demographic, and so many people are moving towards retirement, so many people that and they're going to have various health issues, and it's good what you're doing because it's a more proactive approach to saying, here's the signs, this is what to look for, this is how to deal with it. So I think that's beautiful. So as an experienced nurse yourself, what would you say are the biggest challenges faced by nurses and other healthcare workers who treat people with these kinds of impairments, whether dementia or cognitive related?
Well, certainly human resources is a huge challenge, and that's why organizations like yours, Caring Support, is
Mhm.
trying to working at filling that gap, because certainly we are short nurses, personal support workers who are a vital member of the healthcare team. That certainly is a huge thing, the human resource challenge. I think as well, education. I think education is really something that is a challenge. It's a challenge as far as being able to have the time to do it, because with cognitive impairments, and people who are hospitalized or in long-term cares, they can develop kind of responsive behaviors. If there's a need, if they have an infection, and there might be a behavior associated with that, and that's difficult to deal with. But if you have the education, and the continuing education to understand what can be done to either avoid that behavior, or learn how to handle that behavior without using medication.
Mm, yeah, uh, that's a good point. I like that a lot. I think about I had a family member that died just a few years ago, and leading up to that, they had dementia. And boy, I'll tell you, I mean, it was incredible because you always think of the person that you've always known,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden now they're totally different. They're saying things that are nonsensical. They're and you make a very good point, Kim, and it's obvious that we need to have you on speed dial. And then, but okay, so very related to what you just said. Next question is, what sources or resources do you think, nurses and healthcare workers need?
Well, I mean, there are resources out there. A lot of times it's time to actually, take advantage of those. Um, in Ontario, we have what's called Behavioral Supports Ontario, which is a team. It's promoted by the Ministry of Health, and they are a team that are specialized in dealing with behaviors, responsive behaviors. They are in the community, they are in long-term cares, they are in hospitals. So that's a resource that is available. Along with them, you'll have your geriatric psychiatrists, geriatric or geriatricians that are also available for assessments to make those diagnoses. So those resources are there. Alzheimer's Society, huge, huge. They have psychogeriatric
Right.
clinicians and counselors there that certainly do help people in the community. In one of my previous positions, when I was working at the geriatric clinics, the Alzheimer's Society staff are an amazing resource.
That's awesome. I know I my grandmother, she had Alzheimer's, and then she ended up like just she would get up in the middle of the night and just leave, just because they're trying to find something familiar and whatever. And anyway, my father and I ended up finding a place that specialized. It was like a long-term care, but specialized in dementia and Alzheimer's and all that. And they were amazing. Um, the support and the care was beautiful, and that's what you want because you realize that sometimes we're just not capable of doing it. We're not qualified half the time. We're not capable. Everybody's working full-time jobs and whatever it might be. But the last thing you ever want is that person to fall between the cracks.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's great. Appreciate it very much. So, how can nurses and healthcare workers who treat people with dementia better advocate for themselves and their patients?
Well, along with part of the resources too, I wanted to mention there's a couple of programs. There's a Pieces program. It's kind of a holistic approach to caring for people who have different cognitive impairments, and part of that is getting to know the person, getting to know their story. I think that's huge. Taking that time, and be it if they're in hospital or long-term care. I know a lot of times in long-term care they have a whole system set up to do that. Getting to know the person.
Right.
Um, but it's important in hospital as well, because you want to know what their baseline is, get to know the story, get to know what this person was like, what did they do for a living, years
Right.
ago, like, just emphasizing that personhood of them, I think is huge. um and then it makes it so you have some tools to approach them, um if they were a farmer, you can, talk to them about farming and things like that. Or I had one gentleman, and he was looking at a magazine and it had food, and I was asking him if he ever cooked in his life, and he had cooked in his life. He used to work at restaurants, and so we were talking about the different type of food, and it just helped to focus him for a short period of time.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, Kim, for a minute there, I thought you were giving a course on networking because because like in my community, like we're in London, Ontario, and I love to network. And in my community, I'm known for doing that. But my approach is always going in and leading with helping others. And I tell people that if you really like this, and hopefully you do, take it to the extra step and go to events with the attitude of how do I inspire somebody?
Hmm.
And because it's you're impacting people's lives, and then you become unforgettable.
Hmm.
And but I love what you said, because it's so true, and it's the same thing when we network, when we do any of these things. It's about building that commonality. You're finding things that you see with somebody. And I keep telling everybody that, you know what, the greatest asset we have as humans since we've been on this planet is our ability to share a story.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I said, so take the time to learn about people's stories, because half the time you come out of it and you go, oh my God, I had no idea. And then you find things that you can build with them. And all of a sudden, it's a totally different relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's my speech.
And
So,
I also want to add too, there's
yeah,
always value in going to your manager. I mean, sometimes, there's that fear of going to your manager about, needing to
right.
advocate, but I really think that relationship with your manager is important to maintain that open line of communication.
I agree. I absolutely. And I think a lot of it, healthcare facilities of different types, if people start to realize that it is about the humans, it's not just, like I don't even like the term patients. I'd almost want to call them clients,
Mhm.
because really that's how we should be conducting ourselves, to know that it's really about them. But at the same time, as a leader, whether you're a director of care, an administrator in long-term care, or you're upper management in hospitals, or whatever it is, everybody needs to realize that their staff kind of come first, and then the patients. And I know people may not necessarily agree with that, but you know, if you have staff that's engaged and they love working there and they love the support, they are going to do everything possible to keep those patients, like clients, happy, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you have any suggestions for nurses and healthcare workers who work in long-term care, since we're talking about that, and hospitals, and feel overwhelmed by their work with older, adults and other patients with dementia?
Well, it sounds it sounds kind of, I don't know, like a platitude or something, but self-care. I mean, it's so important. I recently, a couple of years ago, when I started a new job, I met my new colleague, and she said to me, "So, what kind of hobbies do you have?" And I'm like, "I watch TV," you know, and it really made me realize that I didn't have any hobbies. And
Right.
that moment to take self care, I ended up learning how to play the piano, something I always
That's
wanted to learn,
awesome.
and here I'm learning piano in my 50s. So, just I really think self care is important. I probably obviously didn't recognize that as a younger person. I think if younger healthcare workers can recognize that sooner, I think that will help improve their stamina for working, with people with dementia and other challenging situations.
Right. And by the way, Kim, I loved what you just said. That was beautiful. I think it's so true. I always tell people I have so many hobbies that it's crazy. And like I'm really into cooking. I love to read. I read a lot. I love collecting music, especially vinyl. And I love the sound, like listening to the sonics and everything. I I love the network, So there's multiple things, and it's always about finding the time for everything and what you really love to do. But I agree with you 100%. Do you know, you may have not seen our marketplace that we launched. I'm not sure. It's
I
public facing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and you might even think that, hey, I might put stuff on
Oh,
here I
yes, I
want
did
to.
see it. Yes, I did see it.
Yeah. So
Yes.
you'll see Nicole Dawes, who's located in Ottawa. She's written a book all about self care for caregivers
Hmm.
because she herself has lived the story.
Yes.
She has a child that, with lots of exceptionalities. And this is one of the most beautiful people you'd ever meet. And she's written a book which is wonderful. Maybe I'll do an introduction too for you because I think you'd really like her. She's really great. So no, this has been really great, and I've really appreciated Kim. So a couple of the other questions.
Hmm.
Uh, and my favorite one to ask is, what's it like being a superstar?
Well, that's a new term that's been introduced to me by James here. You know what? I like to approach each day, as it comes, and do the best I can with what I have. And I think
That's awesome.
anybody who, gets 2 feet on the floor in the morning is a superstar.
Absolutely. And having a sense of gratitude. And that's another important part. Like I'm a big advocate of emotional intelligence and self-care and empathy and awareness, mindfulness is also important. And I keep telling people, look, man, if you don't have a sense of gratitude by now, I don't know how I'm going to help you. Like
Absolutely.
after everything we've gone through and COVID and whatever, like we should be like really focusing on, wow, I still have my health. I still have all these wonderful things in my life. Like it
Yeah.
could be worse, it could be better, but I can't control some of these things. So what am I going to do right now to make my life better? So anyway, anything else that you'd like to add, Kim, before we go?
That's interesting when you say about having gratitude, and it does put a different spin on it. We think about the last 2.5 years with COVID as this awful thing that happened, but I mean, looking at it as a fact of we can celebrate because we got through it. And
Absolutely.
I like that perspective. So yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times everything's priority. Everybody always says they're so busy. I catch myself saying it and I'm going, yeah, I realize everyone's busy. Um, and everything's priority. When people tell me like, if you're not happy in your job, what are you doing about it? Well, I don't have time. I don't have, but only two sentences earlier, they were talking about binge watching something on Netflix. And
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, you know what, man, sorry to tell you this, but you had the time. It's just really, how badly do you want it? So what I found with COVID is when there was considerable downtime, that was the time where you said, oh my God, I'm going to listen to podcasts. I'm going to read. I'm going to do all these things because I want to achieve this over here. But to get this, I need to do these things to myself to improve myself. Maybe it's I need to learn about entrepreneurship more. I need to learn a whole new skill. I need to learn whatever. But if I have the keen desire, I tell people all these things can be trained. The question is, do you have the attitude?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? That's the thing you can't instill in people. It has to come from within. Um, but anyway, you know what, Kim? You are a superstar. And and not just in nursing and dementia and stuff like that. You're obviously a beautiful human being, and I think it's wonderful that you could bless us with your presence on our podcast. Um, yeah, it's been wonderful. So let's go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you very much, James. I really appreciated
It's our
this
pleasure.
time to chat. Yeah.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Caring support, you know, yes, we've built a job, innovative job matchup platform. We're doing all these other things. We talked about the marketplace, but really at the end of the day, Kim, it's about bringing great people like you and to the forefront. And you're already doing all these amazing things. And we're like, hey, we want to share that story with our audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you.